Why are Democrats protecting Joe Biden?
Mr. Reagan.
Why are Democrats protecting Joe Biden? Why? Why not just throw him under the bus? I mean, I get that he's the best puppet imaginable. He's totally compromised. Everybody in D.C. probably has dirt on the guy. And he's too senile to challenge anybody at all at this point. You just point and go, do that, Joe. And he goes, okay. And he just does it.
Right down here?
Yes, sir. Down the ramp. And we have people lined up on the left over here. Some union leaders and workers.
Hey, guys and ladies.
Your mark is going to be the blue one to the left.
How y'all doing?
You've got a blue mark, and that's okay.
I'll stay in my blue mark, and then I'm going to say hello to each one of you.
Yes, sir. I'll help you get started.
You know, so if you want a puppet in office, somebody that you can totally control, Joe Biden is your guy. But it really looks like the truth about Joe Biden is finally coming out. His corruption in Ukraine, his corruption in China, all over the world. Even the mainstream media is starting to cover this in fits and starts.
Shapley, who is still working for the IRS, told us that even before President Biden took office, he was directed to avoid leads involving Hunter's father.
There were certain investigative steps that we weren't allowed to take that could have led us to President Biden.
And you wanted to take them.
We needed to take them.
And you weren't allowed to take them.
That's correct.
And there seems to be a pretty serious war raging within the Democrat Party as to how to resolve the Joe Biden question, because many Democrats see clearly that Joe is compromised, he's corrupt, and his integrity reflects poorly on the whole of the Democrat Party. And this seems to all be pretty accurate. So why do some still defend him? The benefit of a perfect puppet does not outweigh the potential ruin Joe Biden could wreak upon the entirety of the Democrat Party if the totality of his corruption is exposed. Just throw him under the bus, cut your losses, get on with it. Well, I believe the reason that Joe Biden still has some defenders is a little something called mutually assured destruction. We all think of Joe Biden as the guy who's being manipulated. Everybody's got dirt on him. And President Joe Biden is in a prison of his own making, a prison of the blackmail created by the crimes of Senator and Vice President Joe Biden. But here's the thing. I think that Joe Biden is as much the blackmailer as he is the blackmailed. I suspect that Joe Biden himself or his close allies have as much dirt on other deep state criminals as they've got on him. So if he goes down, the whole house of cards falls. I'll get into the details of this theory in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Reign in wealth like King Charles with a gold IRA from Noble Gold Investments. Just as King Charles's magnificent gold crown symbolizes wealth and power, a gold IRA can fortify your own financial kingdom. Imagine the confidence that comes from a retirement backed by a tangible, proven asset, gold. An asset that's not at the mercy of unpredictable market swings. A crown may not be included, but isn't a future free of financial stress a worthy throne? Like royalty, enjoy the luxury of choice. Gold, silver, platinum, or palladium, the realm is yours to command. Fend off concerns about economic downturns and let your wealth thrive with the timeless security of precious metals. This month, the first solid 1/4 ounce gold standard bullion coin ever issued with Charles III's image can be yours with your own qualifying IRA or 401k rollover of $50,000 or higher. You can't go wrong with Noble Gold Investments. Call Noble Gold at 877-646-5347 to get started today or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Politicians are corrupt. That's a pretty old assumption. But Joe Biden and the 21st century DC Democrats, they're on a whole other level. In my last video, I explained how corruption in 2023, because of the perverse incentives that politicians have created for themselves for pandemics, war, and mass hysteria, political corruption today could end up destroying our entire civilization. But it seems unthinkable that anyone would be that evil. Why would anyone do this? How does anyone get this way? How did Joe Biden become the corrupt grifter that he is now, willing to sell out his entire country for personal gain? Well, the truth is, Biden was a born scammer. He cheated in law school.
Joseph Biden admitted today that he committed plagiarism when he was in law school. He said it was a mistake, but that it was unintentional.
He quoted 5 pages of someone else's work without proper citation.
I was wrong, but I was not malevolent in any way. And so this young fella brought it to the professor brought it to the dean said, explain yourself, Biden. And I wrote, which you will get, it's in my record here, I wrote a 2-page letter explaining why I had been so stupid, but that I did not intentionally move to mislead anybody. I didn't.
He lied about his student record while running for president in the 1980s.
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect. I went to law school on a full academic scholarship, the only one in my class to have a full academic scholarship. Back to law school, and in fact ended up in the top half of my class. I was the outstanding student in the political science department at the end of my year. I graduated with 3 degrees from undergraduate school and 165 credits, only need 123 credits, and I'd be delighted to sit down and compare my IQ to yours if you'd like, Frank.
Biden now concedes he did not graduate in the top half of his law school class, that he does not have 3 degrees from college, and that he was not named outstanding political science student in college.
Newsweek says Biden actually went to school on a half scholarship, ended up near the bottom of his class, and won only 1 degree, not 3.
He lied about marching in the civil rights movement.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes. And we changed attitudes.
And the New York Times reports, quote, more than once, advisors had gently reminded Mr. Biden of the problem with this formulation. He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement, and more than once, Mr. Biden assured them that he understood and kept telling the story anyway. That is really, really weird.
He plagiarized whole speeches.
Democratic presidential candidate Joseph Biden today faces a controversy. 3 weeks ago at a debate at the Iowa State Fair, he used phrases identical to those delivered by British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
Biden seemed to be claiming Kinnock's vision and life as his own.
Why is it that my wife, who's sitting out there in the audience, is the first in her family to ever go to college?
Why is Glenys the first woman in her family in 1,000 generations to be able to get the university?
My ancestors who worked in the coal mines in northeast Pennsylvania and would come up after 12 hours and play football.
Those people who could work 8 hours underground and then come up and play football.
It's not because they weren't as smart. It's not because they didn't work as hard. It's because they didn't have a platform upon which to stand.
It was because there was no platform upon which they could stand.
The notion that every thought or notion or idea you'd have to go back and find and attribute to someone, I think is, quite frankly, ludicrous. I should have said, to paraphrase Neil Kinnock, it's the only time I didn't. Cannot measure the health of our children.
The health of our children.
The quality of our education.
The quality of their education.
The joy of their play.
Or the joy of their play.
He has also quoted or paraphrased John Kennedy, Hubert Humphrey, and British Labour Party leader Neil Kinnock.
So we know he's willing to break the rules, but how does one transition from lying and plagiarism to full-on crime? Selling out your own country, selling influence, and taking bribes? Well, I think it starts with technically legal but highly unethical schemes. Insider trading. That, I think, is the gateway drug.
There are all sorts of forms of honest graft that congressmen engage in that allow them to become very, very wealthy. So it's not illegal, but I think it's highly unethical. I think it's highly offensive and wrong.
What do you mean honest graft?
For example, insider trading on the stock market. If you are a member of Congress, those laws are deemed not to apply.
So congressmen get a pass on insider trading?
They do. The fact is, if you sit on a healthcare committee and you know that Medicare, for example, is considering not reimbursing for a certain drug, that's market-moving information. And if you can trade stock off of that information and do so legally, that's a great profit-making opportunity, and that sort of behavior goes on. And the people who make the rules are the political class in Washington, and they've conveniently written them in such a way that they don't apply to themselves.
The buying and selling of stock by corporate insiders who have access to non-public information that could affect the stock price can be a criminal offense. Just ask hedge fund manager Roger Ratnam, who recently got 11 years in prison for doing it.
One more example of good things happening to powerful members of Congress. Another is the access to initial public stock offerings, the opportunity to buy a new stock at insider prices just as it goes on the market. They can be incredibly lucrative and hard to get.
If you were a senator, Steve, and I gave you $10,000 cash, one or both of us is probably going to go to jail. But if I'm a corporate executive and you're a senator, and I give you IPO shares in stock, and over the course of one day, that stock nets you $100,000, That's completely legal.
And former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and her husband had participated in at least 8 IPOs. One of those came in 2008 from Visa, just as a troublesome piece of legislation that would have hurt credit card companies began making its way through the House. Undisturbed by a potential conflict of interest, the Pelosi's purchased 5,000 shares of Visa at the initial price of $44. 2 days later, it was trading at $64. The credit card legislation never made it to the floor of the House.
Madam Leader, I wanted to ask you why you and your husband, back in March of 2008, accepted and participated in a very large IPO deal from Visa. At a time there was major legislation affecting the credit card companies making its way through the House. And did you consider that to be a conflict of interest?
I don't know what your point is of your question. Is there some point that you want to make with that?
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think it's all right for a speaker to accept a very preferential and favorable stock deal?
Well, we didn't.
You participated in the IPO.
Well, I have many
and at the time you were
investments, but
Speaker of the House. You don't think it was a conflict of interest or had the appearance of a conflict of interest?
It only has the appearance if you decide that you're going to have elaborate on a false premise. But it's not true, and that's that.
I don't understand what part's not true.
Yes, sir. That I would act upon an investment.
Corporate executives, members of the executive branch, and all federal judges are subject to strict conflict of interest rules, but not the people who write the laws.
If you are a member of Congress and you sit on the Defense Committee, you are free to trade defense stock as much as you want to. If you're on the Senate Banking Committee, you can trade bank stock as much as you want, and that regularly goes on in all these committees.
There should only be one thing in your mind when you're drafting legislation. Is this good for the United States of America? That's it. If you're starting to say to yourself, how's this going to affect my investments? You've got a mixed agenda and a mixed purpose for being there.
Bribery is common in private business. There's nothing illegal about bribing an executive or purchasing agent at a company that you want to sell to. This happens every single day. So let's say Company A wants to sell widgets to Company B. Company B builds some kind of machine, and Company A wants to sell them a part for that machine. Company A might know that their part isn't like the best part. They might know that it's not the cheapest part. But what they do is they tell the purchasing agent at Company B, hey, listen, I have an exclusive membership at this golf facility, this golf club. If you give us this bid, if you give us this contract, you're going to get in that club. You know, that's the way business works often all over the world. And again, this is not illegal. You know, people can exchange stuff other than money. And because this happens so often, it's not unthinkable to me that a private businessman might try to bribe an American politician, and it might not even occur to them that what they're doing is illegal if they do this often enough. And certainly foreign businessmen and foreign politicians, or, you know, administrators from certainly corrupt countries, they will definitely do this. I mean, they're doing this all the time, I'm sure. Naturally, that's just the way they do business. So the opportunities for an American politician to get involved in bribery or selling influence, those opportunities will always be there. They will be constant. And I'm guessing that such opportunities are so plentiful that it's actually probably more difficult to never take a bribe as a politician than to at some point agree to one. And you know what? I think it's probably fun. You know, I think to criminals, getting away with their crime is fun. Look at a heist movie. It's a fun genre. If you can get away with it, if there's no consequence, it's very tempting. The reason that many of us in this world don't commit serious crimes regularly, it's not because we're afraid of getting caught. Sometimes that's true. And with some people, that's the primary reason. But with, I think, a lot of people, it's not because we're afraid of getting caught. It's because we actually choose not to do it. Right? There are opportunities for most people at various points in their lives to commit crimes that they know they'll get away with. And they don't. And it's because they're good people. That's the difference between a good person and a Democrat politician. Good people do the right thing even when no one's looking. And you know something else? People like to brag, especially a schemer. When you get stuck in traffic and you look at your Google Maps or whatever, and you see that there's a little side road that nobody seems to know about, you could maybe use that side road to get around the traffic. So you go ahead and you take the side road and your little trick works and you feel like you've won a little victory. You did something that these other suckers, they couldn't figure out. And your friend happens to call you at that exact moment and your natural instinct is to say, hey, you know what? I just did this awesome thing. I beat all this traffic. This was fantastic, right? It's human nature to brag a little bit. And this is also the nature of the corrupt politician. But instead of taking a side road, they're driving on the sidewalk mowing down pedestrians. But they're still bragging about it because they beat the system. They got one over on the rest of us and they think they're smarter and sneakier and better than everybody else. The rules don't apply to them. They are above petty things like the law. And so you get all these politicians bragging about their little schemes, and as they brag, these crimes are collected by their colleagues, and eventually everybody's got dirt on everybody else. And so if one person goes down, well, he can take the rest of them down with him, mutually assured destruction. That's why they call it a house of cards, right? Because if one falls, they all fall. And so now that we have solid evidence of Biden's corruption, we need to move on to the next step. We need to ask, who does he have dirt on? And how can we expose the rest of them? The best schemers keep quiet. I think Obama is probably one of these guys that keeps his mouth shut. I don't think a lot of people have a lot of dirt on him, and I think that's what gives him more power than a lot of other corrupt politicians in D.C. He's got dirt on other people, but very few have dirt on him. But you know, Joe Biden is at another level because Joe Biden, and I'm sure that this is fairly common among different corrupt politicians, especially Democrats, but Joe Biden actually involves his own son in his schemes. Which is just mental to me. You know, there was an article in the New York Times just the other day, and this guy was arguing that the Hunter Biden saga is really the story about a father loving his son. According to this New York Times journalist or whatever, opinion writer, whatever he is, Biden supporting his son is just wonderful. Just, you know, it's just a family thing. This guy tweeted a summary of his own article in which he wrote, "The real meaning of the Hunter Biden saga, as I see it, isn't about presidential corruption, but it's about how widespread addiction is, and how a determined parent with unconditional love can sometimes reel a child back. That can give others hope." You see, guys, it's not really about corruption on a presidential level. It's not about that. What are you guys talking about? It's not about that. It's about the unconditional love of a parent to his child. I mean, Hunter, after all, suffers from the disease of drug addiction. Drug addiction is a disease, guys. It's like cancer or polio. There's no such thing as the abuse of drugs because it's the drugs that abuse you. Hunter Biden just caught the disease. He didn't decide to smoke crack. He caught the disease of crack addiction. It's so sad. It's so sad. I don't know if you guys realize that, but Hunter, he's a victim. He's the victim of a disease that he cannot control. And he had no responsibility in catching it. And all of his subsequent criminal activity is due to this disease, the disease of crack addiction. And if you don't feel sorry for him, well, then you're just a racist. Anyway, in response to this article, there was a mom by the name of Joanne Mason, who came out and she tweeted, "My son struggled with addiction and eventually lost his life, but addiction never made him descend into depravity, use and abuse of women as sexual objects, deny his own child, or engage in large-scale financial corruption. Hunter Biden's problem is that he's a wretched human being." I love that tweet. What an amazing tweet, and what an amazing woman. Look, the truth is, if you look into Hunter's business history, you realize this guy has been a criminal for a very long time. Him and all his friends, they're all crooks. And I mean, I suppose it's inevitable. His dad is also a crook.
Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, all right? I learned it by watching you.
But what's crazy is that instead of protecting his son from this life, from this criminal life, Joe Biden appears to have encouraged it. You know, maybe he actually groomed Hunter for this kind of criminality. And eventually, of course, he did involve Hunter Biden in his political schemes. I mean, guys, this is his son. Would you, okay, let's say you were forced to do some kind of criminal thing, right? Some like pretty serious crime. You felt trapped, you were stuck in a position, maybe you had to do it. It's been against your better judgment, you don't want to, but you had to do it. You made some money, it all worked out. Would you then go, ooh, you know what I want to do? I want to involve my children in this. So if we all go down, all my kids go down too. If I go down, all my kids go to prison. That's what I want. I mean, parents, the instinct of a typical parent is to protect their child. Not Joe. Not Joe. That's the last of his worries. His worry is, how much money can we steal? Can we grift? Can we illegally gather from foreign interests? You know, I think that it was actually Bo that was the heir apparent, right? Bo was supposed to take over the legit political stuff, And Hunter was the disposable son, right? He could engage in the backroom schemes. He could go and vet potential co-conspirators, arrange all the shady deals. As Biden keeps his hands relatively clean, if Bo had then become the senator in Delaware or whatever, he would have been able to carry on that legacy with Hunter, being the bagman, right? But unfortunately for Joe's plans, Bo died of cancer, a fact that Joe Biden has leveraged many times to gain sympathy, even going so far as lying about the way Bo died, implying that Bo died serving in the Iraq War. Yeah, I think Joe might be more saddened by the loss of Bo as part of the family grift than as his son. But let's not pretend that Hunter is an innocent man, his problems are just a consequence of some unfortunate circumstance. No. This guy grew up in a very rich and powerful family. He had every advantage. He chose to start smoking crack. He chose to start paying for hookers. And he chose to photograph all of it for some sick narcissistic reason. And he also chose to commit financial crimes, and he chose to eventually engage with his father in influence peddling and bribery. Joe and Hunter are just as bad as each other. And the fact that Democrats and even the FBI are tripping over themselves to try to protect these two, well, it just exposes them all as corrupt. Why protect Joe Biden? Because if Biden falls, the whole house of cards falls with him. Well, that's it for me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And remember, it's not that liberal friends are ignorant. It's just that they are dangerously corrupt. Good night.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man.